The voicemail came at 3:47 a.m., pulling me from a dreamless sleep. My mother's voice, raspy and desperate, filled my dark bedroom. "Lila, honey, I know it's been years, but I need your help. Things aren't what they seem.
Please call me back.
It's about the house, your father's house. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." I played it 3 more times, each replay making my hands shake harder. 5 years of silence, broken by a middle-of-the-night plea. Classic Serafina, treating time zones and boundaries like gentle suggestions. My apartment felt suddenly small, the walls pressing in. I got up, paced to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. The city lights flickered through my window, casting shadows that reminded me of childhood nights spent waiting for her to come home. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. "I know you're awake. Please." I set the glass down too hard, water sloshing onto the counter. "Damn it," I muttered, grabbing a dish towel. As I wiped up the spill, my eyes drifted to the only family photo I kept, Dad and me at my college graduation, his proud smile frozen in time. He'd been gone 2 years by then, but I'd insisted on displaying his picture at the ceremony. Serafina hadn't shown up. Another buzz. "Lila, I'm scared." My laugh came out harsh. "Sure you are," I said to the empty room. But something in her voice during that voicemail, a tremor I'd never heard before, nagged at me. The house she mentioned was supposed to be mine. Dad's will had been clear about that. But somehow, in the chaos after his death, while I was drowning in grief and final exams, the paperwork had gotten complicated. Serafina's specialty. I picked up my phone, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. Before I could talk myself out of it, I typed, "It's 4 a.m. Some of us work for a living." Her response was immediate. "Meet me tomorrow? The cafe on Brunswick Street, 1 p.m.
Please.
There are things you need to know about your father." My chest tightened. She knew exactly which buttons to push. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, wanted to block her number, and go back to the life I'd built without her. Instead, I found myself typing, "Fine. 1 hour. Thank you, sweetheart. You won't regret this." But I already did. I walked to my bedroom window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Below, a man walked his dog through the empty streets, their shadows stretching long under the streetlights. Normal people doing normal things, while my carefully constructed world started to crack. My phone lit up with one final message. "Don't tell anyone you're meeting me, especially not Dorian." I frowned. The name meant nothing to me, but the warning sent a chill down my spine. 5 years was a long time. Who else had inserted themselves into my mother's web while I'd been gone?
Sleep was impossible now.
I curled up in my reading chair, wrapped in the quilt my grandmother had made before she passed. Tomorrow, I'd face Serafina across a cafe table, armed with 5 years of therapy and boundaries. I'd listen to whatever story she'd crafted, nod politely, and walk away.
Simple.
But as the sun began to rise, painting my walls in shades of pink and gold, a voice that sounded suspiciously like my father's whispered, "Nothing with Serafina is ever simple."
I had no idea how right that voice would be.
Brunswick Street Cafe hadn't changed in 5 years. Same rustic wooden tables, same oversized windows, same barista with the sleeve tattoos. But Serafina had changed. A lot. She sat at a corner table, perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was shorter, blonder, and when she smiled, I noticed the subtle work she'd had done around her eyes. Money had always looked good on my mother. "Darling," she said, rising to embrace me. I stepped back, choosing the chair opposite her. "You look." She paused, studying me. "Tired. Middle of the night phone calls will do that." I ordered black coffee when the waitress came by, ignoring Serafina's slight frown at my choice. "I've missed you," she said, reaching across the table. I moved my hands to my lap. "And I know I have no right to ask for your help. But then don't." The coffee arrived, and I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, anchoring myself. "Why am I here, Serafina?" She glanced over her shoulder before leaning forward. "Your father's house. The one he left you. There's something there I need to retrieve. Something important. The house you somehow managed to sell out from under me? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. While I was writing my thesis and planning his funeral, it wasn't like that. Her perfectly lined lips trembled. There were complications with the estate. Bills to pay. You were so young, so focused on your studies. I was 23. A young man approached our table, and Serafina's entire demeanor shifted. Her spine straightened, her smile brightened, and something that looked almost like fear flickered across her face. "There you are," he said, resting his hand on her shoulder. He couldn't have been more than 35, with a kind of carefully cultivated stubble that screamed, "Trust fund." "You must be Lila."
I'm Dorian. Ah,
The mysterious Dorian from the text. I nodded, but didn't offer my hand. "Your mother talks about you constantly," he said, pulling up a chair. "All good things. Funny, since we haven't spoken since Dad's funeral." Serafina's laugh was too bright, too sharp. "Darling, you know how time gets away from us. Dorian and I are getting married next month. We'd love for you to be there." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "Married? It's going to be quite the event," Dorian said, his hand moving to the back of Serafina's neck. She leaned into his touch, but her shoulders remained tense. "Your mother deserves the very best. She usually gets it," I muttered. "One way or another." Serafina's smile cracked slightly. "Darling, about the house. I should go." I stood up, throwing a few bills on the table. This was a mistake. "Wait." Serafina grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "There are things you don't understand. About your father, about why I had to." She glanced at Dorian, who was watching our exchange with unsettling intensity.
please.
"Just meet me tomorrow alone. I'll explain everything." I looked down at her hand on my wrist, at the massive engagement ring catching the light. "You know what I don't understand? Why you'd call me at 4 in the morning, scared out of your mind, only to sit here playing happy families with your boy toy fiancé." Dorian's smile didn't waver, but something cold crept into his eyes. Serafina's fingers tightened painfully before releasing me. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "The old boathouse.
Noon.
Please, Lila. For your father's sake." I walked out without looking back, but I could feel their eyes on me. Outside, the spring air had turned chilly. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photos I'd taken of Dad's 5 years ago. The house should have been mine. And whatever Serafina was looking for, whatever had her spooked enough to reach out after all this time, I was going to find it first. I broke into my own house at midnight. The irony wasn't lost on me as I jimmied open the kitchen window, the same one that never quite latched properly when Dad was alive. The new owners had never fixed it. The house smelled different, lavender and synthetic pine instead of Dad's coffee and old books. I clicked on my phone's flashlight, sweeping it across the renovated kitchen. Marble countertops had replaced our worn formica. The walls, once covered in my childhood height measurements, were now a sterile white. Something crashed upstairs. I froze, heart pounding, until I recognized the sound of the heating system kicking in. The owners were away. I'd watched their loaded SUV pull out this morning, vacation luggage strapped to the roof. Dad's study was now a home gym, treadmill squatting where his desk used to be. I ran my fingers along the baseboards, searching for the loose piece he'd shown me years ago. "Every house needs its secrets, Lilabug," he'd said, winking as he slid documents behind the wood panel. The baseboard came loose easily. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a stack of letters. My hands trembled as I pulled them out. "Dear Lila," the first one began. "If you're reading this, something's gone wrong. Your mother." Headlights swept across the window. I ducked, heart racing. A car door slammed. The kitchen windows open. Dorian's voice carried clearly through the night air. "Just like you said it would be." She always was predictable. Serafina's laugh was brittle. "Check upstairs. I'll take the main floor." I stuffed the letters into my jacket and looked frantically around the room. The window was too small. The closet too obvious. Footsteps approached the study door. "Lila." Serafina's voice was sing-song. Darling, I know you're here. Let's talk about those letters. The door handle turned. I pressed myself behind the treadmill, praying the shadows would hide me. Serafina's silhouette filled the doorway. You know, she said, stepping into the room, your father always thought he was so clever with his little hiding spots. But he told me everything that last night, when the morphine made him chatty. My nails dug into my palms. Dad had been clear-headed until the end. I'd been there. She hadn't. Found anything upstairs? She called out. Not yet, Dorian responded. But the master bedroom's interesting. Lots of hiding places. Serafina moved to the baseboards, fingers tracing the edge I'd disturbed. Oh, Lila, did you really think I'd let you find them first? Those letters could ruin everything. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around to find Dorian blocking the doorway, his smile predatory. Got her, he said. I lunged for the gap between them, but Serafina was faster than she looked. Her hand clamped around my arm, nails digging in. The letters, she demanded.
Now.
Go to hell. I twisted free, backing away. Dad told me everything was supposed to be mine. The house, the trust fund. Your father was a foolish man who made foolish choices. She stepped closer. Just like you're making now. Dorian, check her pockets. Don't touch me, I snarled, but he was already moving forward. A new voice cut through the tension. Mom? What's going on? We all turned. A teenage boy stood in the hallway, confusion etched on his face. He looked so much like Dad it hurt. Jackson, Serafina breathed. You're supposed to be at Kevin's house. I forgot my charger. His eyes locked with mine. Who's she? Nobody, Serafina said quickly. Just a burglar. Dorian's handling it. I'm your sister, I said, watching color drain from Serafina's face. And our mother has been lying to both of us for a very long time. The letters crinkled in my jacket pocket, and I knew the real war was just beginning. The letters lay spread across my kitchen table like a map of betrayal. Jackson sat across from me, his hands shaking as he read our father's words. He knew, Jackson whispered. He knew what she was planning even before he died. I pushed a cup of tea toward him. At 18, he looked so young, yet his eyes held the same weary knowledge I'd gained at his age. Dad tried to protect us both. By hiding letters in the walls? He picked up the one dated 3 days before Dad's death. Why didn't he just tell someone? The front door buzzed. Through the intercom, Serafina's voice crackled. Jackson, darling, I know you're up there.
Come home.
We can discuss this as a family. Jackson flinched. I moved to the window, peering down at the street. Serafina stood alone, but a black SUV idled nearby, Dorian visible behind the wheel. You don't have to go with her, I said. She'll call the police. His laugh was hollow. Report you for kidnapping or something. She's good at making things look the way she wants them to. The buzzer sounded again, more insistent. I have proof now, I said, gathering the letters. These show how she forged Dad's signature, how she. Those letters won't help. A new voice made us both jump. Dorian stood in my doorway, the lockpick in his hand glinting. Your mother's very thorough about covering her tracks. I stepped between him and Jackson. Get out. Can't do that. He closed the door behind him. But I can offer you both a deal. Whatever she's paying you, I started. This isn't about money. He pulled out his phone, showing us a video. My father in his hospital bed, clearly drugged, mumbling something about changing his will. Your mother's quite the actress, isn't she? The grieving wife, helping her confused husband make his final wishes clear. Bile rose in my throat. You helped her stage this. Actually, no. This was before my time. But I've helped her with other projects since then. His smile didn't reach his eyes. The question is, what are you willing to do to keep this video private? Jackson stood up. You're blackmailing us? I prefer to think of it as negotiating. The wedding's in 3 weeks. Attend, play happy family, sign some papers renouncing any claims to the estate, and this video never sees the light of day. The buzzer rang again. I looked at Jackson, saw my own fury reflected in his face. And if we refuse? I asked. Then this video goes public, along with evidence suggesting you both conspired to challenge the will fraudulently. Your mother's reputation stays intact, the loving parent protecting her husband's true wishes from his greedy children. My phone vibrated. A text from Serafina. Make the right choice, darling. For once. She planned this, Jackson said quietly. All of it. The late-night call, the meeting at the cafe, letting me catch you at the house. She wanted us to find the letters. So we'd know exactly what we stood to lose, I finished. Dorian checked his watch. Tick-tock. What's it going to be? I looked at the letters on my table, at my father's desperate warnings. Then at Jackson, who had Dad's eyes and too much of his trust. We'll be at the wedding, I said. Dorian's smile widened. Smart girl. I'll let her know. After he left, Jackson turned to me. You're not really giving up, are you? I picked up Dad's last letter, dated the day he died. The one I hadn't shown Dorian. The one that mentioned a safety deposit box and a key hidden where only my Lilabug would think to look. No, I said. I'm just buying us time. Only my Lilabug would think to look. Dad's words echoed in my head as I stood in the cemetery, staring at his headstone. Jackson shifted nervously beside me. This feels wrong, he whispered. So does everything else lately. I knelt in the wet grass, running my fingers along the base of the granite marker. Dad and I had played treasure hunt games throughout my childhood, elaborate puzzles with clues hidden in plain sight. This had to be his final game. Someone's coming, Jackson hissed. I kept searching, my fingers finding a slight irregularity in the stone. Keep watch. Paying respects to your father? Serafina's voice cut through the morning mist. I jerked my hand back, but not before feeling something shift beneath my fingers. What are you doing here? I stood, positioning myself between her and the headstone. Can a woman visit her husband's grave? She laid a pristine white rose against the stone. Though I suspect your visit isn't purely sentimental. Jackson stepped closer to me. Mom, please. Quiet, darling. Her smile was razor-sharp. The adults are talking. Did you tell your sister about the trust fund? The one that kicks in on your 18th birthday next month. My head snapped toward Jackson. He wouldn't meet my eyes.
Oh.
Serafina's laugh was soft. She didn't know? Everett set it up before he died.
Quite substantial, really.
Of course. Accessing it requires certain conditions to be met. Like attending your wedding, the pieces clicked into place. That's why you needed us both there. Some legal requirement. Smart girl. Always were. Like your father. She brushed invisible dirt from her sleeve. The trust requires both children to be present for any major distributions. Everett's little insurance policy, I suppose. Keeping the family together. You're not family, I spat. You're a con artist who married our father. Careful, darling. Dorian's quite protective of my reputation. It would be a shame if that video found its way to the police. Jackson's voice shook. I don't want the money. Don't be foolish. Serafina's mask slipped for a moment, something desperate flashing in her eyes. You have no idea what I've done to secure your future. Both of you. What you've done. I stepped forward. You mean like drugging Dad in the hospital? Forging documents? Or maybe, like keeping your father's secrets? Her words stopped me cold. Ask yourself why he needed those elaborate hiding places, Lila. Why a respected professor had offshore accounts and coded messages. Your father wasn't the saint you remember. You're lying. Am I? Check the safety deposit box. If you can find the key. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and darling? The groundskeeper starts his rounds in 5 minutes. I'd hate for him to catch you, disturbing a grave. After she left, I dropped back to my knees, fingers finding the loose section again. A small key slid into my palm. Lila. Jackson's voice was small. I'm sorry about the trust fund. I should have told you. It doesn't matter. But it did. Every new revelation felt like another crack in the foundation of what I thought I knew. We need to find that safety deposit box. What if she's right about Dad? I closed my fingers around the key until it bit into my palm. Then we deal with it together. But as we hurried from the cemetery, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing right into Serafina's hands. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered, "What if revenge isn't what you're really after?" The answer, I feared, was waiting in whatever that key would unlock. The safety deposit box held one item, a USB drive labeled insurance. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop, Jackson hovering behind me in my apartment. Video files filled the screen. Dozens of them, dated throughout my father's final year. I clicked the first one. Dad appeared, looking healthier than in my last memories. If you're watching this, Lila, I failed to protect you both. The money in the Cayman accounts, it wasn't mine. I was helping people hide their assets, laundering it through the university. Serafina found out. "Turn it off," Jackson whispered. I couldn't. Dad's voice continued. "She threatened to expose everything unless I changed my will. But the trust fund, that's clean money. My insurance policy for you and Jackson. As long as you're both present at major family events, she can't touch it." The next video showed Dad arguing with Serafina in his study. She held up papers, screaming about betrayal. He looked defeated, already sick. My phone buzzed. A text from Dorian. "Wedding starts in an hour. Don't be late." I closed the laptop. "We can't go." "We have to." Jackson paced the room. "If we don't show up, she wins everything. She already has." I grabbed Dad's letters from my desk. She manipulated him, blackmailed him. And he wasn't innocent either. Jackson's words cut deep. "Face it, Lila. There are no heroes here."
The doorbell rang.
Through the peephole, I saw Dorian in his wedding tuxedo. "I know you're in there," he called. "And I know what was in the safety deposit box." I opened the door a crack.
"How?"
His smile was cold. "Because I'm the one who helped your father set up those Cayman accounts. Before Serafina. Before any of this." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "What?"
"Get dressed."
"Both of you. The car's waiting." He held up his phone, showing a familiar video. Dad in his hospital bed. "Would be a shame if this went public. Think of the scandal. The university would probably revoke your degree, given the circumstances." 20 minutes later, we sat in the back of his car, me in the bridesmaid's dress Serafina had sent weeks ago, Jackson in a suit that matched Dorian's. "Why are you doing this?" I asked as we pulled up to the church. "Because your mother isn't the only one who needs that trust fund activated." Dorian adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror. "Family events, remember? Like a wedding. Or a funeral." The threat hung in the air as we walked into the church. Serafina stood at the altar in white, beaming at the gathered guests. When she saw us, her smile faltered slightly. "Places, everyone," the wedding planner chirped, ushering us forward. I felt the weight of Dad's letters in my clutch. Useless now. The USB drive in my pocket might as well have been a stone, dragging me down. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered had only revealed more lies, more corruption. "It's not too late," Jackson whispered as we took our seats. "We could still expose everything." But looking at the guests, colleagues from the university, family, friends, people who had known and respected Dad, I realized the truth. Exposing Serafina meant destroying Dad's legacy, tainting every good memory anyone had of him. The wedding march began to play. Serafina floated down the aisle, triumphant. Dorian waited at the altar, watching me instead of his bride, his message clear: play along or else. I'd started this journey seeking justice. Now, sitting beside my half-brother in a church full of lies, I realized justice might cost more than I was willing to pay. The minister spoke. "If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage." I kept my mouth shut and felt the last piece of my father's legacy crumble to dust. The reception hall sparkled with champagne flutes and fake smiles. I watched Serafina and Dorian work the room, a perfect couple built on perfectly crafted lies. Beside me, Jackson fidgeted with his phone. "Got it," he whispered, showing me the screen. The video from Dad's USB drive, ready to stream to the giant display screens flanking the dance floor. One click would expose everything. "Wait." I grabbed his wrist. Through the crowd, I caught Serafina watching us, her champagne glass trembling slightly. Look at her. She's expecting something. Of course she is. Dorian appeared behind us, smooth as silk. Your mother's been waiting for this moment since she married your father. Haven't you figured it out yet? The pieces clicked together. The trust fund, the video, this whole wedding. I turned to face him. It was all her plan. Smart girl. He nodded toward Serafina. She needed you both here, angry enough to expose everything. Because once the truth about your father goes public, the trust fund gets invalidated, Jackson finished. Because it was built on illegal money. And who gets everything then? I asked. Dorian's smile widened. The grieving widow, of course, who never knew about her husband's illegal activities, who only wanted to protect her children from scandal. The microphone squealed as Serafina stepped up to make her speech. Her eyes were wet with tears that looked almost real. My darling children, she began. I know these past years haven't been easy. I felt the weight of the USB drive in my pocket, Dad's final message burning a hole in my chest. Across the room, university colleagues dabbed their eyes, touched by the performance. Do it, Dorian whispered. Show everyone who your father really was. That's what you came for, isn't it? Revenge. Jackson's finger hovered over his phone. One click. But I was watching Serafina, the slight tremor in her hands, the way her eyes kept darting to the exits. This wasn't triumph, it was terror. No, I said, pulling Jackson's phone down. That's what she came for. I walked to the microphone, ignoring Dorian's attempt to grab my arm. Serafina's speech faltered. Mom, I said, the word feeling strange on my tongue. Show them the prenup. Her face went white. Behind her, Dorian froze. The one Dad made you sign, I continued. The one that says if you ever remarry, everything goes to your children, not your new husband. Dorian's mask cracked. What prenup? The one in the safety deposit box. I lied, watching Serafina's expression, along with Dad's real videos. The ones showing who really set up those offshore accounts. Serafina's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Dorian grabbed her arm. Is this true? She looked between us, her carefully constructed world crumbling. Dorian, please. You said the money was clean, he hissed. You promised me. The money was never the point. I cut in. Was it, Mom? You just wanted us here. Together. Like Dad's trust fund required. Tears spilled down her cheeks, real ones this time. I didn't know how else to get you back. Jackson stepped forward. You could have just asked. The room had gone silent, guests watching the drama unfold. Dorian backed away from Serafina, already calculating his escape. The wedding's off, he announced, heading for the door. Good luck explaining this to your lawyers. I watched my mother sink into a chair, decades of manipulation collapsing around her. She looked smaller somehow, more human. What now? Jackson asked quietly. I thought about Dad's real message on the USB drive. The greatest revenge is living well, Lilabug. Don't let the past poison your future. Now, I said, taking Jackson's hand, we start over. All of us. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe it was something closer to peace. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, I stood in front of Dad's house again. The new owners had moved out, unable to handle the constant repairs. The place looked tired, waiting. Are you sure about this? Jackson asked, holding up the keys we'd gotten from the realtor. I nodded. The trust fund had finally activated on his 18th birthday, giving us both the means to buy back what was taken. But that wasn't why we were here. Serafina sat in her car across the street, watching. She'd been sober for 3 months now, attending therapy twice a week. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. She doesn't have to stay in the car, Jackson said quietly. I know. Inside, the house smelled of dust and possibility. We found Serafina's white rose still lying on the kitchen counter, dried and brittle. I picked it up, remembering another rose on Dad's grave. I found something else in the safety deposit box, I said, pulling out a faded envelope. Dad's last letter to you. Serafina's heels clicked on the walkway outside. She'd made her choice. Come in, I called before she could knock. She entered cautiously, her designer clothes replaced by something simpler. Her hands trembled slightly as she took in the familiar walls. "The night your father died," she said, "he asked me to promise him something. To keep our family together no matter what." Her laugh was soft, broken. I managed to do exactly the opposite. I held out the envelope. "He wrote this the day before.
For you."
She stared at it like it might bite. "I don't deserve." "Probably not," Jackson cut in. "But he wanted you to have it." The letter was short. I'd memorized it during sleepless nights, wondering if I was making the right choice. "My dearest adversary, the money was never real. The offshore accounts, the trust fund conditions, all smoke and mirrors. I knew you'd try to control everything after I was gone, so I gave you something to chase. The real inheritance was always simpler. Our children. Love them better than you loved me. They're stronger than both of us."
E.
Serafina sank into a kitchen chair, the letter shaking in her hands. "All this time. We're selling the house," I said. "Too many ghosts. But we're keeping Dad's study furniture, splitting it between our places." "Places?" She looked up sharply. "I bought a condo," Jackson said. "Near campus. And Lila's new apartment has a spare room. For guests," I added. "Family. If they're willing to try." Understanding dawned in her eyes. Not forgiveness. We weren't there yet. But an invitation. A chance. "Your father," she whispered, "would be proud of you both." "We know," I said and meant it. Later, after she left, Jackson and I sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the neighborhood gold. The same view Dad and I had shared so many times, talking about everything and nothing. "Think she'll actually change?" he asked. I thought about the steel beneath Serafina's vulnerability, the strength it took to face your own demons. "I think she already is. The question is, are we ready to change too?" He leaned against my shoulder, so much like Dad it made my heart ache. Maybe that's what he wanted all along. Not revenge or justice, just growth. A text lit on my phone. "Dinner next Sunday? I'll cook." "Mom." The old me would have deleted it instantly. The new me typed, "We'll bring dessert." Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in exposing the truth or claiming justice. Sometimes it's in choosing to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. Dad knew that all along. I looked at our childhood home one last time, seeing not what was taken, but what remained. 2 siblings, a mother trying to change, and endless possibilities ahead. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was ours.